Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramon, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
One. Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. Doing business in life with a purpose, serving others, and yes, achieving success. And boy, you're going to learn all about success today with my incredible guest. I'm your host, Steve Ramon, and we created this show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, and educated from the message that my guest is going to say today to make an impact in your world. I'd love for you, what you learned today, you go to your network and go, man, I just listened to my Steve's podcast and this guest to this, and this. A lot of good quotes will be coming out of that. So while you're listening today, I want you to think about how will you serve today and what impact will you create with that service? Don't wait for tomorrow. Let's start serving today and make that something you do every day as a skill set. With that being said, I mentioned impact. The background in this next guest is going to blow you away. I'm a big sports guy. People that know me know my sports background, my uncle and all that. But he's taken sports to the next level to really help everybody. David, I want to welcome to the show.
Man, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to do this and really fortunate to be able to share the platform with you today.
Let's start with, what does it mean to live in the arena?
And it's so funny because that phrase has really shaped my life, and it's really changed the way I think about a lot of things. So as I got out of college coaching and as I started to launch my business, I really looked back on my own life and I was like, okay, what are some of the things that really contributed to me being able to step into this and be able to launch a business and reach the Division 1 level of coaching and do all the things that I had done? And what I realized was that at some point I made a decision to get out of the stands. Right. And so when you think of life in the terms of sitting in the stands versus being in the arena, it takes no skill set. It takes no talent to sit in the stands and criticize and throw rocks at the people that are down on the arena floor. But to live in the arena and chase something really worthwhile, and it doesn't have to be business. It can be being the best father that you can be possibly. It could be being the best community member, whatever your arena is. But being in the arena means putting your flaws, your shortcomings, your mistakes, your failures on display for the world to see. It means accepting that you may give everything you have and you still might come up short. It means being willing to bet everything on faith and follow through on that. It means accepting responsibility for what you did right and what you did wrong. And it means answering the question. And this is the key, Steve. It means answering the question. And that question is, what are you truly capable of? It means living a life that few are willing to live so that you can have a future that most people will never experience. That's what it means to live in the arena. So when I say that, I always urge people, you have the opportunity to live in the arena of life, or you can sit in the stands with everyone else and throw peanuts and throw rocks. But just remember, there's no statues of critics.
Oh, man. I'm glad I asked that question. You went a completely different direction than I thought, and I didn't think about that. So using the title of this show, you can't be a servant when you're sitting in the stands. And you're being pretty much a non-servant, right?
Yes, it's impossible.
And when I'm hearing the arena, could be fatherhood. It could be community service. It could be running a multi-$100 million company, but be in your arena.
Yeah, because we have a responsibility to be in the arena. And that's the servant piece, right? We all have these unique gifts, whatever they may be. For me personally, it's my ability to connect with people. It's some of the lessons and things that I can share through coaching, speaking, etc. If I didn't live in the arena, if I didn't put myself out there and go after this thing and try and build the impact that I'm trying to build, that's selfish. That's not servant leadership. That's selfish. That's me protecting me. And so when we hold ourselves back, that's what that is. We're keeping ourselves from lighting another candle, and that's selfish, right? So if you really want to be a service, it means that you have to go be the best version of you that you possibly can for whatever that arena is, right? So if you're not growing as a person, you're not going to be the best husband or father that you can be. If you're not growing as a businessman, you're not going to be the best leader that you can be. Like you have to, it requires us to live in the arena to be the best versions of ourselves.
Selfish and impact do not live together.
Can't.
You've said that multiple times. And audience, remember that selfish and impact. You can't make an impact when you're selfish. You make impact on yourself, but that's not what me and you want to do. We want to make impact to the world. How big that impact is. I love asking these questions to people that have been so in depth in sports and your coaching. What have you learned in sports all these years that leads you to where you are today?
And there's so much. Sports were my training grounds, for a lot of things, and starting with leadership. I mean, I was born in a single parent household, never met my biological father. So a lot of the examples of leadership that I saw, came from my coaches and came from what it means to be part of something bigger than myself and to be able to sacrifice. And, believe it or not, Steve, my first experience in true leadership in sports came in a way that most people wouldn't believe, which was I was a 3-year starter on a very good team. I was very fortunate to be a good player on a great team. And my senior year, I was expecting to be named captain. And so I got called down to my coach's office and I'm like, here it is. I'm getting the C on my jersey. This is going to be a big deal. I came from a high school that produced Gatorade National Players of the Year, Division I pipeline. I mean, I was fortunate to be part of kind of this Friday Night Lights, environment. And so being a captain was a big deal. It was basically your stamp of approval. And so I got to the coach's office and he looked at me and he said, Kitch, I need to ask you a question. And I said, okay. And he said, did you vote for yourself? And I said, no. And he said, okay, I'm going to give you an opportunity right now. Do you want to change your vote? I said, no. And he said, okay. He said, you missed it by 1 vote. And I said, really? And he grabbed me and he put my hand on his shoulder. Now, he knew my home situation. He knew how much this meant to me. He knew I wasn't going to college if it wasn't for football. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, that C does not define whether you are a leader or not. This moment does not define whether you are a leader or not. What you do over the next 6 months in preparation for this season and what you do as a teammate will define whether you're a leader or not. And that was my first experience in leadership and in athletics. And that's when I realized, oh, it's not about me. It's not the C is irrelevant. It's about everybody else. Right. And so I went on to learn more throughout the opportunities that I had. And I started to see, especially when I got into coaching, when I got to the Division I, I mean, the top of the top of college athletics, I got to see leadership and culture and high performance in all these different arenas and see the impact that they could have on people. And I started to compile this list and I got my master's in sports psych, and ultimately it all culminated into this conversation with a young man who came to me and he said, Coach, I've been the best player on every team I've ever been on. And everybody's always telling me to lead, but nobody ever taught me how. And this young man, it was, in my opinion, the best leader I had ever coached. And so I thought to myself, if he feels this way, how many other people feel this way? And so I went back to all those experiences, and I'm an avid note taker. So I had years of notebooks and things. And I went back to all of this and I put together this curriculum of all the lessons that I learned from players and from coaches and from administrators in my own life. And I built this leadership curriculum. And that was the foundation of what became Edge Leadership Academy.
So you never played sports, you never would have done this.
Probably not.
I mean,
not.
yeah, it's not 100%,
Yeah,
but
yeah, probably
sports
not.
led you to this path.
100%.
David, you are so humble because you have super success. How much, and you're a leader, how important is humbleness to be leadership?
Oh, it's everything. It's everything. The best leaders I've ever been around are the ones that when everything goes wrong, they're the first ones to step up to the microphone. But when everything's going right, they're nowhere to be found. And their team believes that they could have done it without them. Right? That's what it's all about. And then I preach this to, when we come into businesses and work with CEOs and, 9, 10-figure companies, I'm telling them the higher you go in the organizational chart, the less it's about you. And so it's a balance of humility and confidence, right? I'm very confident in my skill set. I'm very confident in what we can do. but I also realized that there's always a bigger dog. And I always also realized that this is not about me. None of this has ever been about me. The coaching was never about me. The what I'm doing now is not about me. It's about the future. It's about the impact that I can have. It's about my funeral and my family and my children and my nieces and nephews and people coming up and saying things about me that make them go, "Oh, we're proud that that guy was part of our family." That's what it's about to me. That's where the humility comes in, is zooming out and seeing the big picture. Because at the end of the day, Steve, in 3 generations, we're all going to be forgotten unless you build an impact that allows it to carry on.
And it has nothing to do with ego. Audience, remember this legacy he's talking about. I have a good friend of mine, a business partner, Max Lambright, shout out. He talks about a movie. Everybody's been to a movie. At the end, you get the credits. He says, what are your credits after you pass? And I love that. Audience, keep that. If that's your only purpose, to have a great legacy of credits, you'll be very successful. Of course, you're going to add impact and servant, and I want to make 100 more leader, whatever those goals are. It's very powerful. And real quick, shout out to that coach that gave you that advice, because he needs a shout out.
He was my first podcast guest when I launched the company. He was my first podcast guest. I called him and I said, "There's no way I can start this. There's no way I can launch this business. There's no way I can launch this podcast if you're not my first guest."
Wow. What's his name?
Gary Campbell. Gary Campbell, multiple state championships in Massachusetts, one of the winningest coaches in Massachusetts school history. He's a phenomenal guy. And, he came all the way down to Berwick, Pennsylvania to coach me at our high school. And, and this is the thing about him. We talk about humility. He was following up the winningest coach in high school football history who had just stepped down. That was the role that he stepped into. And he came from Massachusetts and knew nobody and stepped into that. And at his press conference, he said, "I'm not going to try and do anything. I'm just going to be me. And I'm going to guide these kids the best I can." And we went on and, we're very fortunate to win multiple championships. And he sent a lot of us to college, man. I mean, there was 14 seniors on my high school team. And I believe 11 of us played college football. So, that's what it was about.
Accolades are great, but it sounds like Coach Gary developed many leaders to change the world.
100%.
And that's probably bigger than any award he got, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, geez. I don't get goosebumps much, and I don't talk about much, but I really am, because this is the whole power of sports. And hey, if you're not into sports, doesn't matter, because we have people from sports like Coach David here that can teach you this leadership stuff. But the thing about leadership is we're still moving forward, and there's still obstacles and setbacks. What still holds you back?
And imposter syndrome, just like everybody else. I'm human, just like everybody else. I mean, I stepped out of a world that I knew, right, which was college coaching. I understood that. I knew how to be successful in that. And I stepped into this world that I knew nothing about, which was the entrepreneurship world. And all of a sudden, I found myself in rooms that I was like, man, I have no business being here. Right. I shouldn't. This is not me. What am I doing at lunch with entrepreneurs? And all these things. I just wrote a newsletter about it. One of the first networking meals I went to, I parked my used truck next to all these, Ferraris and Porsches and everything. And I went in and I was nervous and I tried to make a joke about, the venue being nice. And the guy looked at me and said, "It better be nice. I own the place." And I was like, oh, and for the rest of the meal, I didn't speak because I shrunk. Right. And so it's something that holds everybody back. And so you have to find things to be able to lean on, right? So for me, I look at things like I have an undeniable stack of evidence behind me that I do hard things, and that I'm able to build something from nothing, and that I'm able to rely on my core values of, being kind and being generous and being driven, and those things will all play out. So, I have things that hold me back just like everybody else. There's no secret sauce here. I just work really hard and I try and genuinely be good to people, and good things have happened.
Human side, we can never forget that, because we will make mistakes. God made us fallible for a reason. I don't know, because I can't talk to God, but I know that that's the case.
Yep.
A lesson learning from that story you talked about going to that dinner is, I know a lot of people listening on, I would never even go to that networking meal, but taking action, you went, even though it probably was not as successful as you wanted. Talk about taking action as a leader.
And it's everything. It's everything. At the end of the day, your ability, leaders are created in those figure it out moments, right? We can't manage ourselves to success. We have to lead and we have to take action. And action is messy. You know, when I first got into coaching, a lot of people don't know this, but the reason I got in was because I sat at my table and I wrote letters to every Division I coach on the East, everyone Division I coach on the East Coast. And I said, I'll quit my job and come work for you for free if you give me an opportunity. And that's how I got into college coaching. And so every good thing that has come in my life has come as a result of messy action, right? And so for me, I always look at it and I know that if there's a feeling of fear, there's a 90% chance that I should run face first into it. And so that's just what I try and remind myself. And for leaders, that decisiveness breeds confidence, and it breeds confidence in your people because they look at you and they say, oh no, he's going to run into the building. And he might not have all the answers, but he's going to figure it out. And he's going to stay in there while the building crumbles until he figures it out and until it's safe for everybody else. That's who he is, right? And those are the things that set leaders apart. And so it's your ability to just make decisions. And as young leaders and early on in our leadership journey, we often get caught up with trying to make the right decision and the perfect decision, right? And so much of leadership is being able to make the best decision possible with the information that you have at hand. And you always reserve the right, if you lead with humility, to make a U-turn and say, hey, I was wrong. I have new information now. We're going to course correct. But as long as you're making those early decisions with your vision, your mission, and your values in mind, people are going to respect it and people are going to understand, you know, and so you just have to, it's not about making the perfect decision. It's about making a decision.
You're talking my language because I talk about, you just said it, I use opportunity door. You walked into that networking event, you reached out to those coaches, you will try to open doors and eventually one open. Does it take you a month, a year, or 10 years? We don't know the how, why, or where. And you just, and have you noticed successful entrepreneurs, successful athletes are like that? They keep pushing for and they keep asking.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the old phrase, right? Closed mouths don't get fed. And you don't know until you know. And so it's the ability for you to continue to look for new opportunities to put yourself in a room that might turn out well or it might turn out poorly, but you don't know. And you know, to bring that full circle, the time horizon thing that you were talking about, right? One of the entrepreneurs that was at that meal that I went to when I first started my business, 2 years later, he was one of our biggest clients. His company was one of our biggest clients. It took 2 years, right? But it started over a meal. And as we grew and we built a relationship, and 2 years later, he said, hey, we're in, 45 states and we do, regional meetings with our managers, and we need somebody to come in and train our managers on leadership and work with our senior staff and our senior executives and our C-suite. Do you want to travel the country with me for the next 9 weeks? I said, absolutely, let's do it. Right. So for the past 2.5, 3 years now, we've done that every year where we travel all over the country with this guy. And that never would have happened if I didn't go to that meal. And if I didn't just suck it up. I could have walked out after I made that first stupid remark about the restaurant being nice, right? I could have turned around in the parking lot, but it's about just being able to sit in the discomfort long enough. And I had a mentor that always said, don't get out of pressure, sit in it and let it do its work.
I won't be looking at the camera. I keep writing all these incredible quotes, and that story is what audience you need to hear. He didn't know 2 years later to be a client. You never knew he'd be a client, and you were uncomfortable, and you thought you screwed up. And when you left there, sorry, I'm getting excited because you left there and thinking, okay, that was a failure. That's okay. I'm going to take, and you were decisive, not indecisiveness, because that is an entrepreneur catastrophe, tragic when you're indecisive. If you made a decision not to go, but you went to something else, that's a decision. And you'll never know because you'll never know if you had that client. But I'm sorry, this is so powerful. We had a great conversation before the show about participation trophies. You said a phrase, I think sports builds leadership, and you've done that. Look what you've done from sports to leadership. Talk about that quote and what you mean by that.
Yeah, it's participation trophies to me, and kind of this culture that we're in where everything is kumbaya, and it extends to the business world. It extends to leadership and culture in the business world. There's so much pseudoscience out there and pop culture facts that we're talking about, like, oh, everything has to be hunky-dory and we have to do kumbaya and sewing circles and everybody needs to get along. And listen, at the end of the day, leadership is a messy game. And business is a competition. Okay. There's stats and there's wins and losses. And so when I think of the participation trophy culture, right, it scares me because we can try and do away with winners and losers in schools and in youth programs and even into the high school and college level. We can try and tell you everybody is great. But the fact remains that the world has not gotten rid of winners and losers. There's still a scoreboard. And so we have to teach people to be able to learn from their losses and reflect on that and be able to sit in the discomfort of saying, hey, I tried as hard as I possibly could and I wasn't good enough this time. Because then you start to frame it and you be able to say, oh, no doesn't mean no. It just means not yet. It means that I have to go back and learn some new skills. And I realized this at the college level. I mean, we had young men and young women that were coming to us at the Division I level, and they felt like they had never done anything wrong in their life. And so all of a sudden you come in and now you're not playing. And you went from playing every minute of every game your entire life, and now all of a sudden you're on the bench and you don't understand why. And that's such a valuable lesson. And the earlier in life you can learn that, the more valuable it is, because now you can look at the people to your left and your right and say, okay, what skills do they have that I need to build? Why am I lacking? Why are these things happening? And you learn that introspection. And that's the key to it. And one of the reminders that we always gave our players when they came in, when I was at UNLV in particular, we always ask them, how many of you guys want to go to the NFL? Everybody's hand goes up, right? Everybody wants to be a pro athlete. And then we'd remind them, listen, the majority of people that hold NCAA records are selling insurance somewhere. That's the reality. So if you want to be one of that 0.1%, here's a list of the things that you need to do. And we were very clear about it, right? And then you can make a decision. And this is a decision that I tell people all the time. It doesn't have to be going to the NFL. It could be being an entrepreneur. It could be being a great father. Again, all the examples we gave earlier, you have to ask yourself, okay, when I look at this price tag of what this thing really costs, before I make an excuse as to why I can't get it and I try and blame it on somebody else, which is the participation trophy thing, you need to ask yourself, was I unable to do it, or was I unwilling to do the work that it took to become that person? Because those are two very different things. And when you at least admit to yourself that you were just unwilling to do the work, then you can start to fix that and you can start to work on that. But if you say I was unable, well, based on what? Because other people have done it. You know, I just don't believe that. And so I just think participation trophies and that whole concept of removing the competition from things, I just think it's so dangerous for us because the world has not removed competition and it never will.
I like that because I'm an athlete. You're a much higher level, and it doesn't matter. But the stigma of pro athletes, pro, college, high school, that they're not very smart. Stupid is the word sometimes.
Yeah,
you know, Steve
jocks.
and David, they're great at their sports. They're jocks. They're stupid. But you've blown that label way out of the water. Masters and all this and working. Now you're in leadership, which I know you didn't think of when you started this. And I love it. I want to put that out there, is how powerful you could do whatever you want. You're proving that every day. So God bless you so much.
Thank you.
You like to speak around the country. You like to get this message out. But one thing you talked about is, how do you prepare for these presentations?
And so much of it is having habits. So much of it is having a system in place, right? To win once, you can get lucky. To win consistently, you have to have a system in place. And so there's a lot of things that go into it for me. The first thing is just figuring out what is the message that I can leave these people with that is going to have the most value, right? Whatever that is. And again, it's removing your ego from it, because sure, there's things I'd love to get up on stage and toot my own horn and this, that, and here's what I did and listen to my story, right? But if that's not going to help you, then why should I do that? And so for me, I always look at it from three lenses. I look at it and say, what, so what, now what? So what am I going to tell these people? Why should they care? And most importantly, what are they going to do with that information? And so every time that I look to build a presentation, I always want people to walk out with at least three things that they can implement in their lives today. And I don't want them to walk out with a bunch of just little quotes that I said. I want them to walk out with, no, here's a step-by-step. Here's how I do this today. And here's how I make this work. So when I'm having those conversations with the organizers of the event, I ask, what's the number one thing that your audience is facing? What's the number one thing? If I could wave a magic wand and help your company or your organization or whatever it is, what would be the thing that you would want me to fix? And I'm not saying that I can, but what's the thing that I can do that can orient them in that direction? Right. And so that's the number one thing that I do when I prepare for events. The number two thing is just remember, again, people are giving me their most valuable resource, which is their time, which means I have to deliver value. I have to deliver value to them. And so I'm kind of sometimes can be a nightmare for organizers, because I urge people to stop me in the middle of my keynote and ask questions. Like, hey, I want to make sure that you're getting the most out of this you can. It's not about me or the words on this screen. It's about you getting the value. And so there was one particular event where I literally sat down on stage and I had a conversation with somebody in the front row, and I had the microphone and everybody could hear it because I knew other people probably had that same question. Right. And so to me, it's again, connection over content. It's being prepared and knowing what kind of value they're going to get. And then after that, man, it's just being authentic. I'm myself. I am myself. I've turned down speaking opportunities because they want me in a shirt and tie. That's not who I am. It's not who I am. I show up in my Jordans or my cowboy boots, and my tattoos are out and my earrings are in, and I'm me, and I'm gonna be me, right? And so I will never lose that human aspect to me. So when we're preparing for events, man, I just try and give them. I say I show up scars and all. Like, I am who I am. I am not a guru. I'm not preaching from a Lamborghini or a yacht. I'm the same person as you. I'm just a few steps ahead in the valley with a flashlight, and I'm asking you to follow me. That's it. And so those are kind of my keys to getting ready. And then obviously just the preparation piece, right? Like, for every hour that I'm on stage, I've rehearsed that talk 8, 10, 12 times. And no two are the same. I don't do canned speeches. So you see some of these motivational speakers, I'm not throwing shade. That's their thing. That's what they do. They've crafted a message that's phenomenal. It's just not my style. So I won't give the same talk. Even if, so for instance, we did a 9-city tour earlier this spring. And even though it was the same topic, each talk was different, because I just don't believe in rehearsing something to the point where I have it memorized and I'm just spitting that out. Like, it's just not who I am. So each one's going to be a little bit different.
Plus, take in mind, you talk to the organizer, each group's different.
Correct. Exactly.
It could be, just State Farm, 5 different State Farm agent offices. One's in Idaho where they don't make a lot of money. One's in New York where they're all wealthy. Right. There's 2 different groups. You're going to speak to them completely. There's the wealthy one's not going to talk about, exactly. That guy's an audience, girls too. That's a game changer if you're doing presentations. And I'm so fired up. I'm just going to build an event to have you speak at. That's how good what you just said is, because it's so good. Well, we're at the end of time. I'm going to have Coach David back because there's much more we could talk about. But let's get a little personal. You interviewed Coach Gary. I know it's probably one of your top interviews, but anybody, alive or not, who would you like to interview and why?
That's a great question. I'd love to sit down with Jordan Peterson. Honestly, I think he's a really interesting human being, and his thought process to me is really intriguing. My number one question for people is always like, what are your personal growth habits? What are your personal development habits? And so with him, I'd love to know, how do you digest the information that you bring in? Because he reads and writes at such a volume that's really impressive. And so if it wasn't him, I'd say Robert Greene would probably be next. On those lists. But yeah, anybody who brings in a high volume of information and puts out a high volume of information, I want to know what filtering systems are you using? How are you building that? And how are you taking that in? And at the end of the day, I mean, I know this is a long-winded answer, but I think it's important to say anybody that has mastered something, I would love to sit down with, because they have figured something out that allowed them to achieve mastery in an arena. And to me, that's interesting, because the success and the secret sauce is in their habits and in their mindset. So anybody that's at that level, I want to sit down with and ask all the questions.
My dad always used to say, never recreate the wheel. And I learned last year, ABL, always be learning. And It's really cool, because I'm the same way. I've asked that question a lot, and about 30, 40% do what you do. I want a guest that I can learn from. Mm-hmm. And then I can share that abundance with other people. That's what a servant heart does. Real quick question. This is real personal. What does David do on a Friday night?
And honestly, I haven't outgrown a bonfire and a cold beer. I'm still a country boy, man. I grew up in the woods, and so Friday night to me is about family and football, and having a little bonfire and having a cold beer with my buddies and my best friends and my family and my dog, and then waking up Saturday morning going fishing, brother.
Love it. Love it. And that's the thing. I love asking that question because here's a super successful coach and ex-coach for sports. He still takes time for family. He's not working on a Friday. And that's why I picked that day. I mean, everybody's different, but most days, Fridays, we're not working. I'm the same way. I put a documentary on. It's mind brain out. I worked all week and I love that. David, thank you so much. I've learned so much. The audience has learned so much. And like I said, I'll reach out to you, have you come back. We got to do a part 2 and talk about the helmets. And there's so much that we could talk about. And, with this audience, this is one of those shows that I hear, it's 26 minutes. I don't have time. I got to work. Use the 4 reverse buttons on the podcast. If 5 to 8 minutes change your life, or you share that with somebody and it changes their life, me and David are going to be super pumped. Yeah, we want you to watch and listen to the whole show. That's the ultimate goal, but our major goal is making a difference in your life. So keep that in mind. Use those buttons there. They're there for a reason. That's what I think they're there for. Also, my TV show, Together We Serve, it's 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Samsung TV, LG, all these different streaming services. Check it out. I got a surprise for you. I think Coach Kitch, I'm going to ask to be a guest because we got to talk more about this. And last but not least, doing business with a servant's heart. You listen to David for 26 minutes, how a servant's heart's changed his life. Why not spread that message out? Wear a hat, t-shirt, hoodie. Get the message out. Yeah, I'm selling something. Somebody goes, well, you're selling something. You know what I'm selling? I'm selling a message. And for me, a legacy that when I leave this earth, I have this legacy of a servant's heart. So help me with that. Love for you to do that. Don't forget to comment. If you comment on the YouTube channel, I'll get it to David if you have any questions. By the way, David, how can people reach out to you?
Man, super simple. I'm at Coach D Kitch on every single social media.
Beautiful. Reach out to him. You have questions. I know he's going to answer. We have his team. Hire him for events. If you do events, I'm going to put it out there. Hire him. Reach out to me if you can't get him, and I'll get you connected with them because this is a guy you want talking to your team. And last but not least, me and David, thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you all.